The Beer Hall Putsch. The party continued to grow, and in November 1923, Hitler felt that the time was ripe to seize power in Bavaria. In this venture, he had the support of General Erich Ludendorff, second in command of the German army during the war and Germany's virtual dictator during its last 2 years. Support which Hitler hoped would persuade the army to not intervene. In fact, he could not have been more wrong. The armed uprising, which was subsequently named the Beer Hall Putsch, after the beer hall from which Hitler and Ludendorff started at the head of their 3,000 followers on November 9, was a complete disaster. The army was ordered in to halt the insurrection, and in the fighting that followed, 16 Nazis were killed. Hitler and Ludendorff were arrested and tried for treason. Ludendorff was freed. Hitler, in his turn, received a 5-year jail sentence. Paradoxically, it was the trial that was the making of the Nazis. Hitler, who dominated the proceedings with his personality and oratory, emerged as a national figure. His party became known more widely than before, and he assumed a new stature. As it happened, Hitler served only 9 months of his sentence, time enough to dictate his political testament, Mein Kampf, to his secretary Rudolf Hess. The failure of the Putsch had made Hitler realize that, despite his rabid hatred of democracy, he would have to use it to come to the position of power from which he could then destroy it. This revelation coincided with a change in the Nazi policy necessitated by the altering economic situation. Previously, Nazi propaganda had been geared to the working class, which had been worst hit by the Depression after the war. But the resurgence of the Weimar Republic's economy in the middle 1920s created full employment again. So Hitler switched his campaign to the middle classes, whose savings had been wiped out in the post-war inflation and who did not profit from the new boom. Thus, Hitler set about building up the party on a solid basis of the middle-class industrialists and financiers who he offered the carrot of greater profits once the communists had been disposed of and the working class had been brought under control. The new approach's success can be gauged from the growing membership of the Nazi Party. In 1925, 25,000, and in 1928, 110,000. Yet in 1928 too, it did poorly in the elections, with only 800,000 votes and a mere 12 out of 491 seats in the Reichstag. Then, once again, the world economics played into Hitler's hands. In 1929, the Wall Street crash and the subsequent World Depression handed Hitler the German working class. The results were startling. In the first year of the Depression, the membership of the party almost doubled. And though the Communist Party also benefited, the Nazis were better placed to exploit their success. The Weimar Republic was entirely unable to cope with the crisis, and after the defeat of a minority government in the summer of 1930, the elections were scheduled for September. The Nazis polled 6.5 million votes and won 107 seats. They were unable to use their newfound power, however, as the Chancellor Brüning ruled the decree. By the end of 1931, the party membership had passed the 5 million mark. Hitler's next move was to contest the presidency in the spring of 1932. Hitler came second to the aged German World War I hero Hindenburg, but secured 37% of the vote. The next few months witnessed the bewildering succession of events. Franz von Papen, not even a member of the Reichstag, became Chancellor, and the elections which followed the Nazis polled 14 million votes and won 230 seats, to make them the largest party in the Reichstag. But Hindenburg, on the advice of General von Schleicher, the army's political chief, only offered Hitler the vice-chancellorship, which he refused. After another election and 2 offers to the chancellorship in coalition governments, the intrigues of Schleicher finally persuaded Hindenburg to make Hitler chancellor on January 30, 1933. The last stage in Hitler's rise to power had begun. The new government was, however, only an interim one, pending new elections, but once again played into Hitler's hands. On February 27, the Reichstag was burned down. It seems likely that a Dutch communist was responsible, but Hitler quickly laid the blame on the German communist door. In the subsequent anti-communist panic which swept the country, the Nazis triumphed in the elections of March 5 with a total of 17 million votes, 44% of those cast. On March 21, the new Reichstag met in the garrison church at Potsdam. It was the beginning of the last session, for the Nazi majority voted through an enabling act on the 23rd. This gave Hitler the right to legislate on matters of finance, foreign affairs, and the constitution. Hitler was now firmly established as Germany's leader. All he had to do was to gather in the last elements of power not already in his hands. All the political parties, except the Nazis, the trade unions, and all the employers' associations were abolished, and the old federal constitution of the nation was replaced by a system of Nazi provinces, or Gauss. Next, Hitler purged his party. He had long been worried by the ambitions of Rome, and the dissonance of the Strasser brothers, Gregor and Otto, who had been in the party from the beginning, but were now worried about the swing away from the true socialism. On June 30th, 1934, Hitler did away with all the opponents in the Night of the Long Knives. Hitler's personal bodyguard, the Schutzstaffen, or SS, led by Heinrich Himmler, murdered Röhm and the Strassers, Schleicher, and many others whom Hitler and his chief minister Hermann Göring had decided to eliminate. Hitler's total supremacy within the Nazi Party was now completely assured. The last obstacle to Hitler's absolute power was removed on August 2, 1934, when Hindenburg died. The office of the president was abolished and its functions amalgamated with those of the Chancellor in the new position of the Fuhrer. The army then swore all allegiance to Hitler personally, and finally, a plebiscite on the 19th gave Hitler an overwhelming vote of approval. The task of purging Germany could now begin in earnest, and then Germany would be ready at last to turn her attention to fulfilling Hitler's vast territorial ambitions.